The Bf-108 Typhoon was where Messerschmitt's design philosophy took shape. Built as a touring and communications aircraft, it introduced features that would define every fighter that followed. Slotted flaps, leading-edge slats, and a lightweight stressed skin structure. It was elegant, efficient, and fast for a civilian machine. The Bf-108 wasn't built for war, but it taught Messerschmitt how to build aircraft that were. It proved that advanced aerodynamics and simplicity could coexist, setting the template for everything that came next. The Bf-109B emerged from the lessons of the Taifun and the demands of a rearming Germany. Compact, agile, and armed with machine guns, it first saw combat in Spain during the Civil War. It outclassed biplanes and early monoplanes with shocking ease. The 109B was underpowered compared to what followed, but it validated the concept. A small, light, high-performance fighter could dominate if designed correctly. It wasn't perfect, but it proved Messerschmitt's approach worked in actual combat. The Bf-109E brought the design to maturity. Powered by the Daimler-Benz DB601 engine, it combined speed, climb rate, and firepower into a lethal package. Over Britain, it clashed with Spitfires and Hurricanes, proving both its strengths and limitations. The Emil climbed fast and dove hard, but turn fights exposed its weaknesses. Still, it dominated early war skies across Europe and North Africa. The Bf-109E established the type as the backbone of the Luftwaffe and a global benchmark for fighter design. The Bf-109F refined everything the Emil had attempted. Cleaner aerodynamics, a redesigned cowling, and improved handling made it the most balanced variant ever produced. Pilots loved it. The Friedrich flew beautifully, responded precisely, and delivered performance without the compromises of earlier models. It sacrificed heavy armament for speed and agility, trusting pilots to make every shot count. The F model represented Messerschmitt's design at its purest, prioritizing flight characteristics over brute firepower and proving that refinement could be as deadly as raw power. The Bf-109G became the most produced fighter variant in history, with over 24,000 built. Designed to counter heavily armored Soviet and American aircraft, it carried more powerful engines and heavier weapons. But that power came at a cost. The Gustav was heavier, less agile, and more demanding than the Friedrich, yet it remained competitive through sheer adaptability. Field modifications, boosted engines, and relentless upgrades kept it fighting until the war's end. Gustav proved that mass production and constant evolution could sustain dominance even as the design aged.
The Bf-109K represented the final evolution of the design, an attempt to extract every remaining advantage from an aging airframe. It combined the best features of late-war variants with improved aerodynamics and a more powerful engine. The Kurfürst was faster and climbed better than earlier Gustavs, but it arrived too late and in too few numbers. Production chaos and fuel shortages limited its impact. Still, it showed that the basic 109 design could be pushed further than anyone expected, remaining competitive against aircraft designed years later. The Bf-110C was built on a controversial idea, the heavy fighter. Twin-engined, long-ranged, and heavily armed, it was designed to escort bombers deep into enemy territory and destroy anything that challenged them. In Poland and France, it dominated. Over Britain, reality hit hard. Spitfires and Hurricanes exposed its lack of agility. The 110 could outrun some threats and outgun others, but it couldn't turn with single-engine fighters. It wasn't a failure, but it proved that heavy fighters needed different missions than originally imagined.
The Bf-110G found its true calling in darkness. Equipped with radar, heavy cannon, and upward-firing guns, it became Nazi Germany's most effective night fighter. Hunting British bombers over the Reich, it destroyed hundreds of aircraft. The G variant's size, endurance, and stability made it ideal for carrying radar equipment and loitering in patrol zones. It turned the 110's greatest weakness, its lack of agility, into irrelevance. Against heavy bombers at night, Raw firepower and persistence mattered more than maneuverability. The 110G finally found its war. The ME-210 was supposed to replace the BF-110 entirely. It promised better performance, heavier armament, and improved handling. Instead, it became one of Messerschmitt's most notorious failures. Unstable, dangerous, and prone to spinning, it killed test pilots and terrified operational crews. Design flaws in the tail and fuselage created handling characteristics that bordered on lethal. Production was halted, restarted, then abandoned again. The ME-210 taught a brutal lesson. Advanced designs meant nothing if the aircraft couldn't fly safely. Messerschmitt's reputation took years to recover. The ME 410 Hornisse salvaged the wreckage of the ME 210's failure. Messerschmitt redesigned the fuselage, lengthened the body, and fixed the aerodynamic disasters that made the 210 deadly. The result was stable, fast, and heavily armed. It excelled as a bomber destroyer, reconnaissance platform, and fast bomber. The Hornisse could carry devastating firepower, including 50mm cannon for shredding Allied bombers. It arrived too late to change outcomes, but it proved Messerschmitt could learn from catastrophic mistakes and deliver a competent heavy fighter when given a second chance. The Me 163 Komet was insanity made operational. A rocket-powered interceptor with no landing gear, minimal fuel, and a flight time measured in minutes. It climbed at terrifying rates, reached speeds no Allied fighter could match, and attacked bomber formations with brutal speed. Then it glided back to Earth, hoping to survive the landing. The Komet was as dangerous to its pilots as to the enemy. Fuel exploded, landings killed, and operational time was absurdly short. It proved rocket propulsion worked, but also that desperation produces weapons too extreme to be practical. The MAD 262 Schwalbe changed everything. The world's first operational jet fighter, it was faster than anything in the sky. Powered by twin Jumo 004 turbojets, it could outrun, outclimb, and dictate engagement terms against any Allied aircraft. Armed with 30mm cannon, it shredded bombers in single passes. Pilots who flew it called it a revolution, but engine reliability was poor, fuel was scarce, and Allied bombing destroyed production. The 262 arrived too late and in too few numbers. Still, it proved jets were the future, and piston fighters were obsolete. The Me-262A2 Sturmvogel was the fighter-bomber variant, born from Hitler's obsession with retaliation rather than defense. Carrying bombs instead of maximizing its interceptor role, it sacrificed the 262's greatest advantage, speed-focused air superiority. As a bomber, it was fast but carried limited ordnance and lacked precision. The Sturmvogel wasted the jet's potential during critical moments when bomber destroyers were desperately needed. It represented strategic confusion, political interference overruling tactical sense. The A2 worked, but using a revolutionary jet as a light bomber was a squandered opportunity that Germany couldn't afford. The Me-262B1A or U-1 became the world's first operational jet night fighter. A two-seat variant equipped with radar and upward-firing cannon, it hunted Allied bombers in darkness. Its speed made interceptions faster, and its endurance allowed extended patrols. The jet engines glowed visibly at night, making it easier for bombers to spot, but its performance advantages often outweighed that risk. Only a handful became operational before war's end, but they proved jet technology could extend into specialized roles. The U-1 hinted at what jet night fighters would become in the decades that followed. The Me-163B was the production variant of the Komet, refined but no less dangerous. It corrected some design flaws, improved the volatile rocket fuel handling, and standardized production. Pilots still faced extreme risk. The T-STOF and C-STOF fuel combination was corrosive and explosive, dissolving human tissue on contact. Landings on skids frequently resulted in spinal injuries. Despite this, the B model destroyed Allied bombers with shocking efficiency when it reached them. Its success rate per sortie was high, but operational losses from accidents often exceeded combat kills. The 163B proved performance alone couldn't justify a weapon's existence. The ME-264 was born from ambition and propaganda. Designed to strike New York from German bases, it promised transoceanic range and strategic reach. Four-engined, heavily armed, and theoretically capable of reaching America and returning, it represented Hitler's obsession with retaliation. Only prototypes flew. Range estimates were optimistic, defensive armament inadequate, and resources were desperately needed elsewhere. The ME-264 never came close to operational status. It symbolized strategic overreach, a weapon designed for psychological impact rather than military necessity. Germany couldn't defend its own skies, let alone bomb across oceans. The ME-321 Gigant was a monster. The largest glider ever built for combat operations, it could carry an entire infantry company, light tanks, or artillery pieces. Towed by multiple aircraft or specially modified bombers, it was designed for airborne assaults on massive scale. The Gigant was enormous, ungainly, and operationally complex. Launching required immense power, landing was controlled chaos, and recovery was nearly impossible. It saw limited use in resupply operations on the Eastern Front. The 321 proved that glider technology had limits and that size alone didn't equal effectiveness in airborne warfare. The ME-323 Gigant transformed the unpowered 321 into a six-engine powered transport. Capable of carrying 120 troops or equivalent cargo, it became the Luftwaffe's largest production transport aircraft. Slow, vulnerable, and unmistakable in the air, it was massacred by Allied fighters over the Mediterranean. Formations were decimated in minutes. Yet it filled a desperate need, hauling supplies to North Africa and the Eastern Front when rail and sea routes failed. The ME-323 was crude, dangerous, and essential. It proved that desperation creates demand for aircraft that wouldn't survive in any other context. The ME-309 was Messerschmitt's attempt to leapfrog the Bf-109 entirely. Featuring a tricycle landing gear, pressurized cockpit, and advanced aerodynamics, it promised superior performance and pilot comfort. Test flights revealed problems. Handling was poor, visibility limited, and performance gains were marginal compared to development cost. The Luftwaffe rejected it, choosing instead to continue upgrading the proven 109. The ME-309 joined the scrap heap of ambitious designs that failed to justify their existence. Innovation without practical advantage wasn't enough. The 309 proved that evolutionary improvements often beat revolutionary redesigns when resources and time are limited. The ME-238 was born from desperation and improvisation. Designed as a cheap, disposable fighter and bomber, it could be built from non-strategic materials like wood. Powered by pulse jets or towed as a parasite fighter, it represented Germany's collapsing industrial capacity. Test flights showed severe vibration problems from the pulse jets and questionable structural integrity. The concept was sound on paper, a throwaway interceptor launched in swarms, but execution was fatally flawed. Few were completed, none saw combat. The ME-238 symbolized the gap between desperate innovation and engineering reality when resources vanish and time runs out. The ME-239 was an attempt to merge heavy fighter and ground attack roles into a single airframe. Twin-engined, heavily armored, and designed for low-altitude strikes, it promised survivability and firepower. Prototypes were built but never reached production. The design was sound but redundant. Existing aircraft already filled similar roles, and manufacturing capacity couldn't support new types. The ME-239 fell victim to wartime prioritization. It wasn't bad, just unnecessary. Germany needed more of what worked, not experimental platforms that diverted resources. The 329 disappeared into the chaos of late war cancellations and abandoned projects. The Me-261, Adolfine, was designed for record-breaking long-distance reconnaissance flights. Sleek, efficient, and equipped with extended-range tanks, it could theoretically fly missions across continents. 3 prototypes were built. They performed well in testing, demonstrating impressive endurance and speed. But the operational need for such specialized reconnaissance disappeared as the war turned. The Me-261 conducted limited missions, mostly experimental or propaganda-focused. It proved Messerschmitt could build elegant, long-range aircraft when freed from combat pressures. The Adolfine became a footnote, a capable design rendered irrelevant by strategic collapse. The Me-155 was originally a high-altitude variant of the Bf-109, designed to intercept bombers above 40,000 feet. As development progressed, it diverged so far from the 109 that it became a distinct aircraft. Featuring a pressurized cockpit, extended wingspan, and turbo-supercharged engine, it promised performance in the stratosphere. The project was transferred to Blohm & Voss, redesigned extensively and never entered production. The Me-155 revealed the limits of adapting existing designs. True high-altitude performance required purpose-built airframes. By the time this was understood, resources and time had evaporated completely. The Me-209-2 shared only a name with the 1939 speed record aircraft. This was a completely new fighter design, intended to replace the aging Bf-109 with superior performance and handling. Prototypes flew well, showing improved speed and climb rates, but production priorities and bureaucratic inertia killed it. The Luftwaffe preferred investing in proven designs and jet development rather than another piston-engined fighter. The Me-209-2 arrived in the wrong moment, too late to matter and too conventional to excite. It joined dozens of competent designs abandoned because adequacy wasn't enough when facing systemic collapse. The Bf-162 was designed as a light bomber and reconnaissance aircraft for export and Luftwaffe auxiliary roles. Featuring a twin-boom configuration and glazed nose for observation, it promised versatility and affordability. Development was slow, and interest evaporated as war priorities shifted toward frontline combat types. Only prototypes were completed. The Bf-162 wasn't flawed, just irrelevant. Germany needed fighters and bombers, not multi-role light aircraft for secondary missions. The project was quietly canceled, its resources redirected. The 162 became another casualty of wartime focus, a reasonable design that never found its moment. The Me-265 was conceived as a high-speed reconnaissance aircraft, blending jet propulsion with long-range capability. It existed mostly on paper, with limited development before cancellation. The concept was ambitious, combining cutting-edge engines with strategic reconnaissance needs. But jet technology was too immature, and resources were diverted to fighters and interceptors. The Me-265 never progressed beyond preliminary design stages. It represented the kind of forward-thinking project that peacetime economies pursue and wartime economies abandon. Reconnaissance jets would dominate post-war, but Germany couldn't afford to develop them while losing air superiority. The Me-310 was intended as a heavily armed destroyer and escort fighter, another attempt to create an effective heavy fighter after the Me-210 disaster and Me-410 correction. Design work incorporated lessons from previous failures, emphasizing stability and firepower. Development was abandoned before prototypes flew. The Luftwaffe had lost faith in heavy fighters for escort roles, and the Me-410 already filled niche requirements adequately. The Me-310 died in the planning stage. A victim of institutional trauma from the Me-210 fiasco, had lasting consequences for heavy fighter development.
The May 609 was one of Messerschmitt's strangest concepts, a twin fuselage heavy fighter created by joining 2 May 309 airframes. It promised extended range, heavy armament, and unique tactical flexibility.
The design never left the drawing board. Engineering challenges were immense, and the May 309's own failure eliminated any foundation for the project. The 609 represented creative desperation, attempting to salvage failed designs through radical combination. It joined the graveyard of paper projects that consumed engineering hours but produced nothing. Innovation without viable components is just speculation with blueprints. The May 334 was a proposed lightweight fighter using wood construction and a single jet engine. Designed for rapid production with minimal strategic materials, it represented Germany's crumbling industrial situation. The design aimed for simplicity, cheap manufacturing, and mass deployment against Allied bombers. It never progressed beyond mock-ups. Jet engines remained scarce, production facilities were under constant bombardment, and even wooden fighters required resources Germany no longer controlled. The May 334 symbolized fantasy planning, projects approved on paper while factories burned and supply chains disintegrated. Desperation produces ideas faster than reality can build them. The Avia S-199 was Czechoslovakia's post-war attempt to continue Bf-109 production using available components. Built with mismatched Jumo 211 bomber engines instead of proper Daimler-Benz fighter's engines, it flew terribly. The torque was brutal, handling was vicious, and pilots called it dangerous. Czechoslovakia exported them anyway, and Israel bought them out of desperation during the 1948 war. Israeli pilots hated flying them, but used them to gain air superiority when nothing else was available. The S-199 proved that even poorly executed derivatives of legendary designs could matter when alternatives didn't exist. The Hispano Aviación HA-1112 refined the Merlin-powered 109 concept further. Spain continued production and development, incorporating improvements and modifications based on decades of operational experience. These aircraft appeared in films, portrayed ironically as Luftwaffe fighters due to their visual similarity to wartime 109s. The HA-1112 served Spain until 1965, making it one of the longest-serving derivatives of a WW2 fighter. It represented the final evolution of Messerschmitt's iconic design, built by a neutral nation long after the war that birthed it had ended and been forgotten.
The C-3603 was Switzerland's heavily modified version of the Bf-109, redesigned for ground attack. Fitted with a different engine and strengthened for carrying bombs and rockets, it diverged significantly from the original fighter design. Switzerland operated them for decades, using them for close air support training and light strike missions. Neutral throughout the war, Switzerland continued operating German-derived designs without the political complications other nations faced. The C-3603 proved the 109 airframe could adapt to roles far beyond air superiority, surviving in service until the jet age made piston attack aircraft obsolete. The P-149 was Piaggio's post-war primary trainer, developed in Italy using Messerschmitt design principles and engineering expertise. Former Messerschmitt engineers contributed to its development after relocating to Italy. A low-wing, tandem-seat trainer with conventional landing gear, it bore the fingerprints of German design philosophy: simplicity, efficiency, and performance focus. The P-149 served air forces across Europe and Africa for decades. It represented the quiet continuation of Messerschmitt's design legacy through engineers rather than companies, knowledge transferring across borders when political entities couldn't. German engineering survived the Reich's destruction through the people who created it.
The Messerschmitt Me-108 Typhoon found new life after the war ended. France seized production facilities and continued building them as the Nord 1000 Penguin for civilian and military use. Fast, efficient, and reliable, the design proved valuable for liaison, training, and communications roles across Europe. Hundreds were produced in France, serving into the 1960s. The post-war Typhoon demonstrated that good designs transcend the conflicts that birthed them. Stripped of wartime association, it succeeded purely on aeronautical merit. Messerschmitt's first production design outlived the Reich by decades, serving nations that once fought against it. The Messerschmitt ME-208 was a proposed 5-seat touring aircraft based on the Bf-108 Typhoon, designed for the civilian market. It featured an enlarged fuselage, increased passenger capacity, and improved comfort. Development began before the war, but was halted as military priorities consumed all resources. The Messerschmitt ME-208 never flew. It remained a set of drawings and abandoned prototypes. Post-war interest vanished as newer designs dominated the civilian market. The 208 represented the civilian future Messerschmitt never reached, a reminder that the company existed before armament and might have survived without it.
The ME-409 was a proposed high-altitude interceptor derivative of the ME-209-2, designed to counter high-flying Allied bombers. It featured extended wingspan, pressurized cockpit, and boosted engines for performance above 40,000 feet. The project never advanced beyond design studies. Resources were exhausted, and Germany's focus shifted entirely to jets and rockets as final desperate solutions. The ME-409 joined countless late-war proposals that consumed engineering time while contributing nothing operational. It symbolized planning for scenarios that would never arrive, designing for a war already lost while pretending otherwise. The P-1101 was Messerschmitt's exploration of variable sweep wing technology. The wings could be adjusted on the ground to different angles, allowing testing of various configurations. Captured incomplete by American forces, it influenced post-war research, particularly Bell's X-5 experimental aircraft. The P-1101 never flew under German power, but its influence reached across the Atlantic. It proved Messerschmitt remained innovative until the absolute end, exploring concepts that wouldn't mature for decades. Variable geometry would define jet fighters in the Cold War. Messerschmitt saw it first, but couldn't survive long enough to develop it.